You already know what Palworld is. You probably clicked this video. You saw what it was about, surely. Palworld is, or I guess was, the big game of this year at time of writing. It's kind of crazy to think about. 2024 just started. 2023 was a packed gaming year. No one knew what 2024 would bring, but it was super exciting. Then, suddenly, a new genre-defining game comes out, breaks records in Steam charts, it surpasses CSGO of all games in active player count in its launch week, it had a huge launch and seemingly had no end to its continuous rise. And all this from an indie game, from a company no one had ever heard of before. In hindsight, it makes sense. It's a game that takes mechanics from popular video games and meshes them into this one title. It's got an interesting premise, and it's got a ton of people playing it. I mean, it looks super fun! And the pals look really cute and cool, even if they remind you of someone. Arguably, the other reason why it's so popular is because of how much controversy it's gotten into. This game plagiarized Pokemon! It steals from other games! The CEO is evil because he loves AI! Is what I can remember from the Palworld frenzy. It certainly does advertise itself as the grown-up Pokemon game, or more famously, Pokemon with guns. But honestly, that's been talked about to death now. You already know that Pokemon versus Palworld is a thing, and how crazy it all was, and how it ultimately led to more eyes on the game and all that. I've played a little bit of this game myself, and for the most part, I did enjoy it. I can see why people find fun in this game. I have some favorite pals, of course, but I also enjoy that, for once in the creature collecting genre, it isn't a slow, turn-based RPG. It's taking mechanics from other games, sure, but it's smart in how they use them, for the most part. I also really like the accessible difficulty options. I know Palworld isn't the first game to do this. AAA games like The Last of Us Part 2 have this, but the fact that they included it here is awesome, and I want to see more games do this in the future. However, this video is actually about the other controversy. The things that Palworld has that people don't talk about much, or maybe you've even forgotten about it. Look, you saw the runtime. This is going to be a long video, so apologies in advance. I can give you this as the best TLDR, but I really think you should watch this all the way through to understand what this is all about. Palworld is a game that does not know what it wants to be. Its mechanics and features push the game in one direction, while the themes push it in another direction, and its subject matter makes it hard to tell why this game was made or why they went down this specific route. It wants to be a game that's all fun with no room for the player to dwell on its world, its characters, or even the titular pals themselves. Yet, there is evidence to suggest something more here. Some hints that illuminate how the player isn't and shouldn't be considered the hero of this world. But it pulls its punches, far more than it needs to, because maybe the game simply wants to be a mindless, popular, fun game more than anything, which is doing it a disservice. This video isn't interested in talking about the plagiarism thing, and if Pokemon is being brought up here, I want it to be used as a way to judge Palworld on its own merits through comparison. That isn't just the boring, ugh, it's a Pokemon clone and it's copying, ugh. We as gamers have established that already. As you probably guessed, this will be a deep dive into Palworld, on the merits as a game, as an experience, and how people have taken to viewing what kind of experience it is versus what it says it wants to be. So please, join me in this insane rambling rant disguised as a YouTube video essay on the curious, quiet controversy of Pokemon with guns. Okay, so for starters, I think I need to explain how I look at these mechanics and features and why exactly I am going after Palworld so strongly. From my own experience, which I admit is not professional, but from being a goddamn video gamer, I've noticed some basic patterns that lead to more cohesive games. And being cohesive is very much a good thing. Even in the most chaotic, weird games like, I don't know, Cruelty Squad, there is still a cohesive through line in the gameplay itself. When making something that requires a more creative lens, you gotta first figure out what is the theme of the project, the systems within that support that theme, and the intent behind it all. Sometimes it's as simple as, we make Mario game is fun, we make jump arcs or running speed or jumping off Goomba fun, we do all this to make Mario game fun. But even in this example, I'm simplifying everything. In Mario 1, items and enemies are meant to challenge or enhance the player's skills all the way to the end of the game. Enemies are too hard to jump on? Here, have a fire flower. Use that to kill enemies safely from a distance. Running and jumping is fun, but levels are gonna get boring if all you need to do is to just jump over everything. So let's add the Hammer Bro. This guy is specifically designed to get you to stop running and jumping, to mix up the pace, to create more challenge, to make the player stop and think instead of mindlessly becoming a running jumping simulator, and more importantly, to make children cry, which is funny. If the player gets too scared or complacent, make sure there's a timer that ticks down to incentivize the player to beat the stage as quickly as possible. The entire intent is, yes, to make the game fun, but more specifically, it's so that the player is constantly challenged and rewarded for good play, and improving at the game feels more satisfying as a result. I mean, why else is it nice to get the top of the flagpole? It's satisfying just hearing that point tally going down based on how quickly you beat the level, or how high you touch the flagpole, or how many points you earned in the level itself. Even seemingly aesthetic things, like the fireworks or the course clear jingle itself, increase that satisfaction at the end of the level. In early games, that's all that was needed to make them so enjoyable. The mechanics and systems and even the simple theming like the bare-bones story or the simplistic 8-bit music just made them that much more punchy. And as games evolved, the systems and designs grew more complicated, and the intent had to be supported by more things in more ways. Basically, this three-way relationship of themes, mechanics, and intent is made to answer one thing. What's the point? Why make this game? Or rather, why make this game this way? Well, everything that's in this game is a way of the developers directly telling you why, even if it's something as simple as game fun. Now, let's take a more modern, story-driven game like, I don't know. Arthur, this is Arthur. Everybody say hi to Arthur.
Hey, folks.
Arthur has the Deadeye ability for two purposes. Purpose 1, to kill a bunch of enemies at once in a cool cowboy way that looks super cool and aw. It can also help ease off enemy pressure, which is definitely helpful in later missions or when you commit crimes. And Purpose 2, it contextualizes the gunslinger personality and role of Arthur Morgan, the character, which matches his quick and bold decision-making and cutscenes.
I need help! You silly fool!
It fits the themes of the game being the final chapters of the Wild West, allows players to engage in the cowboy fantasy, and is a mechanic that is incredibly useful in major parts of the game itself. Even other systems help strengthen its purpose to exist within the theme of the game, like engaging in cooking or chewing tobacco, which recovers your Deadeye. These activities are what you kind of expect a cowboy on the run from the law to be doing, and the mechanics subtly contextualize that. And by the way, this is mechanically just a bullet time button. You know, where time slows down so you can take accurate shots at a whole bunch of enemies in a really cool way. It's a mechanic plenty of developers, including Rockstar, have used before in other games before Red Dead 2. But I picked Deadeye for a reason. Like I say, Arthur Morgan is one of the last real gunslinging outlaws in the West at this time. His ability contextually reinforces that theme of his character, which immerses the player even further into the story and the world Arthur lives in. So, from that, you can already tell that a major intent of this game is immersion. Immersion of not just the Wild West, but of American culture and history. Every single encounter or interaction you find in Red Dead 2 is a glimpse into the dev team's ideas of what American culture was and what the spirit of American culture is. American culture is a driving force in the story, and it's in a setting where that culture is starting to change, and people like Arthur Morgan are trying to exist in spite of it. By the way, I got all this from just one mechanic in this game, and yet it can help tell you that much. I haven't even mentioned caring for your horses, having to clean your gun, the entire gameplay of hunting, having to take care of Arthur himself. The point is, in order to convey a theme well, your mechanics have to reflect that theme, and moreover, have a clear intent to it. You can't just throw in mechanics randomly and haphazardly without some thought into it.
You should put thought into everything in your game, even something like a text box.
So, is this easy to do? No. Hell no. Some games try to have their mechanics fit with the intent and fail spectacularly at it. Because making sure these things work is actually a really hard thing to do. Things can go wrong, mechanics may not play out how you want them to, the theme or intent of the game can change during development. Because development is, as far as I can tell, not static in the slightest. You can also figure out the themes of a game through things like music, art direction, the genre the game is in, the setting the game takes place in, or any combination of at least some of those things, which I hope I have made clear. I'm just trying to tell you all of this because, as some of you may have predicted where this is going, Palworld systems and mechanics don't seem to have any kind of intent, outside of the vague sense of, we want the game to be popular. And for those in the know, this shouldn't be so surprising. There have been interviews and talks with Pocket Pair's CEO, Takuro Mizobe, who has shown that he cares more about making the game fun over making the game original or unique. So take my crude, simplistic example with Mario 1, before I explain it further, and just apply it to Palworld, I guess. Then it says here, make clever allusion to foreshadowing. Oh shit, I wasn't supposed to say that. So, why is this a problem? Plenty of games borrow mechanics from other games. In art, taking ideas from others is kind of a given, and can lead to amazing products. Hollow Knight wouldn't be nearly as good as it is if it didn't take the open-ended item progression structure that Super Metroid and Castlevania Symphony of the Night pioneered. That's why games like it are classified as a Metroidvania. But even a AAA boring play-it-safe company like Ubisoft or Activision include mechanics with the intent of, well, it worked before, we can do it too, or we can do it again. Palworld is in that same range. But Ubisoft will maybe borrow from just Breath of the Wild, or Genshin Impact, another Zelda clone, sure, but it also borrows the element mixing mechanics of Xenoblade Chronicles 2 to elevate their game's combat as well as a predatory gacha game can. Across genres, people will be inspired to take ideas from other people. And even if someone says they're derivative, it still clearly works. Again, I don't think Palworld is much different from that. But there's something specific Palworld does, or maybe something they borrowed, which feels out of place. And this aspect is making it hard to tell what the game wants to be. It's unclear at best, and at worst is a bit unsettling in a way that I don't think they intended. Let me explain. Okay, so what's the major game loop here? You start the game by punching a tree and making a crafting table. Shit. Okay, you start the game by finding some materials, making a workbench, and making pal spheres to go catch the pals. Once you do a bit of that, you can set up a base, and from there, you can set up one pal to work. Get more materials, craft more things, catch more pals, bring them to your base to work, and repeat. Catch pals, bring them to your base, get them to get you resources and materials, craft things, catch more pals with those things, and repeat. It's a simple and effective game loop, where most things do lead into themselves relatively naturally, and it fits the game's general themes I think it's going for. So now we have the major systems and mechanics, but what exactly is the theme of Palworld? Well, usually the stories in games, even in simple games like Mario or Kirby, help us answer that question. But Palworld has made the landmark, groundbreaking decision to not have a story at all outside of lore dumps and text boxes. Of course, it's early access, more to come, so maybe it'll mean something. It's very possible this video becomes outdated because of the whole early access tidbit. But look, I need to talk about this or else I go insane, so whatever. So if the story doesn't exist, that doesn't mean there isn't a theme. Plenty of games have no traditional or really any kind of story, but there's still a theme to them. The gameplay or mechanics that may have been taken from other games can still help explain the reason for why Pocket Pair decided to make this game this way. Right from the jump, because it's taking mechanics from games that tend to feature nature, we can assume that one of Palworld's major themes is human versus nature. Some games do this, Breath of the Wild did this, even Pokemon and Digimon have done this. But I think Palworld does a better job at making it feel more imperative to survive than Pokemon or Digimon have before. Since it's a survival game, hunger incentivizes the players to find resources, especially for their pals. Sure, these mechanics mainly stem from Ark survival, but they work very well here too. Pocket Pair's world feels dangerous contextually. The pals are much stronger than you. Even the weaker ones can hurt you if you aren't too careful, and fighting some of the most dangerous pals without a pal yourself is practically suicide. You also need to feed yourself and need a place to sleep or keep yourself warm. Not even Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, or Elden Ring do as much of that. And pals are imperative for you to survive on Palworld, which match up with many of the Creature Collector games' themes of collaboration and symbiosis with man and nature. So, one major theme could more accurately be man and nature versus nature, which is actually very interesting. It's a theme that I don't even think games like Ark or Minecraft or Pocket Pair's own Craftopia boast as a major theme and mechanic. You can go through all of Minecraft never having a pet and get by just fine. And in Ark, taming the dinosaurs are really just emphasizing the power fantasy of fighting them in the first place. In Ark, you aren't trying to work with nature, you're trying to conquer it. But here, the pals interweave with the survival. Unless you are already amazing at the game, you can't do very well without pals from a resource management, an exploration, or a combat context. The pals need you. You need the pals. Work together to survive, or die trying. Thus, this man and nature versus nature theme should also reflect the base building mechanics Palworld also has. Well, here's where this gets weirder. Okay, so here's where this really starts. To build a base, you need a PAL box. So already the game is incentivizing you to interact with the systems of catching pals and having them work in the base. The game's mechanics have lined up the T-ball here, and the intent, catching pals in order to work at the base, is the bat that is going to hit the ball. Now, we just need the central theme, human in nature versus nature, to swing to tie it all together. Each PAL in the game has a specific set of skills that can be used for different types of labor. As you can see here, with Lamball, he has construction, transportation, and crafting. Pretty self-explanatory. And the element types, a la Pokemon, that the PALs have can also determine what they can do. Water PALs can water plants, fire PALs can cook, electric PALs are power sources, and so on. The devs even took the art designs of the PALs into account when making the system. T-Fant here is small, and it doesn't have any arms, so it can't do transportation, nor can it hold a gun. But the trunk is actually not just for show here. It can still water plants, power mills, and be the best guy in the whole world. Specific PALs who have hands can hold guns. Some PALs can be mounted units. This seems very obvious, but it shows that the devs actually put thought into how these designs would work in a game like this. And this kind of design philosophy is rarer than you think in the creature collection genre, and I think that's really cool. It's all very sophisticated, and it's really impressive seeing how the PAL's designs actually reflect their usability. It creates engaging gameplay this way. But PALs can't work forever. Every PAL has a sanity meter. This meter is basically their stress meter. The lower it is, the more stressed the PAL is. If they aren't being fed, if they get sick and you don't treat them, then they get more stressed and production slows down, or worse, the PAL passes out. You can, of course, feed PALs, give them medicine, make hot tubs for them to take breaks in, but all that is done through how the player chooses to deal with these mechanics. This leads to the work schedule thing. After advancing through the game a bit, you unlock the monitoring stand as something to build. This stand allows you to customize the work speed, the workload, and the rest time for your PALs. Without it, or at its normal speed, it is usually classified as humane. Already an interesting tone setter of a name. Regardless, there are 3 other speeds: relaxed, hardworking, and super hardworking, all with different icons and stats giving you an idea on how they work. Notice the text and the icons describing the more demanding speeds. Hardworking is cruel, and super hardworking is brutal, and their stats easily describe what results you will get. The game is not shy in telling you that if you pick these modes, your PALs will not be working happy. Hell, the relaxed setting was added after the game was out, so at launch, the normal work speed was the best you could do for them. For the short amount of time I had the game on normal before I got the stand, Kativa here was draining sanity fast. Hey guys, quick disclaimer here. I said in the video that Kativa's sanity was going down before I got the monitoring stand. This is actually incorrect. It's actually his hunger that was very low when I noticed this discrepancy. Kativa's sanity was like around like 99 or 100. Even though he was like doing stuff with like the mining and the transporting and all that stuff, he was still like relatively okay. It's just that he was doing so much work that he didn't really have that much time for eating. But I will say that hunger does affect sanity, both in the game and in real life. So I don't think what I'm saying here is too inaccurate, but know that when I'm talking about his sanity, I'm really talking about his hunger, which is still important in Palworld. So yeah. The game warned me that if the sanity got any lower, Kativa would begin slacking off, which is the one thing I've noticed the PALs ever do that's seen as a form of retaliation. But we'll get to that later. At the time, Kativa was the only one that could mine, transport, harvest, and craft. I had to put in 2 Kativas to ease the workload, and even still it wasn't enough. Kativa had to take short breaks, but it barely helps because as soon as he got back to work, his sanity drained faster than it recovered. I had to quickly go get a hot tub and build that stand to set it to relaxed mode just to get him to chill. I didn't want him doing that much, but Kativa was lucky that I was so benevolent to worry for his safety. After all, players are free to do whatever they want to these cute or cool creatures. And the results can be noteworthy. But please, if you wish to still believe that this stuff isn't that much of a problem for the hypothetical theme of man and nature versus nature, maybe you should look at how the game frames the working conditions from the PAL's perspective. Or tries to. You see, when a PAL gets stressed out enough, it will have a sad expression, walking around looking visibly upset, and it will work slower. Of course it would. It's supposed to be a living thing. But if it's a living thing, surely it has agency, right? It can move on its own. The minute you put it in the base, it walks around and then finds something to do with no input or requests from the player ever needed. Just goes straight to work. But still, maybe it's just super excited to work. But I mean, when things get so brutal at the base, the only thing a PAL can do that makes it voluntarily stop working is if it slacks off. Not even just stops working altogether, just works less. The way the game frames it, it's like an act of defiance in a way. But you can simply just replace it, butcher it if you're mad at it, condense it into a fluid for another PAL to drink from, or, alternatively, give it pets or a hot spring, and it will just forgive you, even if it continues to be forced to work hard. Yeah, I don't know. To me, that just doesn't sound like a very fun existence. There's a general sense that the PALs want to work. Like, the children yearn for the mines, the PALs yearn to work on the plantation. Even if they get sad and stressed, they will keep trying to work. Remember, these are the mystical animals that practically could kill you in one hit if you breathe funny in the wild, but once you catch them with the Pokemon mechanics, then they just accept you and anything you do to them. Right, not a weird consistency issue or anything like that. Not like you could try to do anything interesting with that little quirk. Okay, so what? Pokemon has that happen too. In fact, it's been a criticism of a lot of monster catching games, right? Why should the Lucifer-inspired Giratina want to work for a human who's 5 times smaller than it just because they beat it up and put it in a ball? Well, as far as the Pokemon world shows, you can't really abuse your Pokemon. There's no way to make their lives a living hell as much the same way as Palworld does. There are trainers in the lore who do abuse their Pokemon, but they're usually seen as the bad guys, incompetent, or just flawed people in general, sometimes all three. I haven't played Temtem, but I'm pretty sure it's the same idea. Many creature collecting games have had that theme of abuse is bad, but here, in this scenario, the would-be bad guy of the Pokemon world or in Temtem is the player character in Palworld. And the Syndicate gang, we'll get to you later. Pretty much do all of the same things the player does, beating up PALs, catching PALs and putting them in the base, using them as tools to fight others, etc. period. But they look evil, so they're evil, and you are the good guy, I guess. That gang is seen as a nuisance to the environment and the other humans in the game. But even if the base gets raided, the PALs, stressed and broken as they are, will defend it to their fainted breath. Please dislike this video. Even though the PALs know that the only reason they are in this hellish base is because of their harsh master, they still follow orders. Another reason why catching legendaries and having those legendaries submit to you works in Pokemon is because of man's relationship with Pokemon. See? I was going somewhere with this whole theming thing. The Pokemon world has humans and Pokemon coexisting as well as they do in Palworld. But the Pokemon, at this point, understand what humans are and what living with them may entail. They are offered protection and safety with a human. They may be given companionship, which every living thing does see as a good thing, both real life and in Pokemon. This is already good enough, but Pokemon can also get stronger. Some of them can only reasonably evolve under the command of humans. Any Pokemon you catch is guaranteed to be stronger than their wild counterpart, even with just a little bit of grinding. And for certain Pokemon that fight a lot, or want to be stronger, that may be a huge desire for them. This can mostly be applied to Palworld, and games like Digimon or Temtem as well. Humans in all of these games gain the same types of advantages: protection, a pet, a partner, and in the Pokemon world, a skilled and respected laborer. Pokemon is supposed to be an impossible utopia, so some suspensions of disbelief are expected, as with all games in the genre, including the non-utopian Palworld. But unlike Palworld, Pokemon are seen as equals to this labor, or even in battle. They help the humans out with things humans can't do, and the humans can help tell them what they need to do, while feeding them and giving them a place to live with a purpose beyond just wild animal survival. It's a symbiotic relationship, which can always lead to much more interesting themes and stories than just having humans order them around. There's a reason why Pokemon as a concept captivates so many people, especially outside of the games, beyond just being cute merchandise material. Of course, not just that, but it's a very foundational attribute the franchise takes advantage of. And its setting is a utopia that is still trying to show some realistic depictions of connection and bonds. With Palworld, you could try to make that a thing without the utopia. Hell, that could be a lot more interesting. But the pals are so quick to work and only want to work that the relationship feels a bit too artificial. Here's me trying to pet this Pangullet. The Pangullet AI gets confused and doesn't know whether to beckon to me or to continue working. Of course, he decides to pick up the stone and continue working. Yeah, I know it's probably better to disregard this, as it's just a small hiccup that can be patched. You know, coding is hard, which I'm not denying at all. But honestly, it says a lot on how the developers wanted or expected the players to see these pals as physical manifestations in the world. Like, let's be honest here, if you turned all the pals into generic robots, it would make the base building feel more natural and make more cohesive sense with its design. Wait a second, what's this satisfactory footage doing here? And I know I sound like a broken record here. The major thing about all of this is the fact that the pals cannot refuse you. They can only work until they literally can't anymore or slack off in vain. They can't even die from overwork either. A player literally tested this out. For 8 whole days, he put the pals to their absolute limit in the harshest labor settings possible. And yet not one pal died. And until the experiment concluded, they all were trying to work even still. At worst, they can get sick, I guess, and then faint, but apparently all you have to do to fix it is just to put them in the PAL box, maybe give them some medicine, and boom, back to normal. Could you imagine being at your job, working around the clock 12 hours a day, then getting a stomach ulcer, and your boss is like, alright, you're going to the timeout zone, but be back at work in 15 minutes or else you're gonna be Dragon's energy drink, buddy. That is such a band-aid, lazy solution to the problem. It feels so thoughtless compared to the rest of the base system. At the risk of sounding like a psychopath, why shouldn't they die due to overwork? Just hear me out. Unlike a lot of the other mechanics like climbing, the combat, gliding, catching pals, this specific mechanic of the base building labor system is not something I've seen any popular game do before. Not to say it doesn't exist, and I'm sure you're thinking of one right now, but like Palworld, unlike those other games, has become incredibly successful, rivaling household indies like Among Us or Lethal Company for a time. So a lot of people for maybe their first time, will need to grapple with the sanity/work schedule system, which is a micromanaging kind of skill to learn. That skill can be a really fun one to develop through video games, so I believe it's important to take full advantage of that when making a core game mechanic, if that's what you are going for anyway. So, what if you failed to take proper care of your pals, they died? And like, not faint and you just put them in the box and they heal and come back later. They just lose all their energy and just die. I mean, that's what some of the trailers seem to indicate would happen.
Creating a productive base like this is the secret to living a comfortable life in Palworld. But be careful not to overwork your pals. Goodbye.
And the parallels to real-life harsh work environments is obviously not lost on me, on you, on any other YouTuber or media influencer covering this game, or on any other player for that matter. They obviously put a lot of thought into this. It's one of the most advanced systems to understand in this game, yet it just misses it. You almost have it. You're so close. You're just so close. There seems to be more negatives to actually being nice and benevolent to your pals than being a hard boss and just torturing them. Because you won't get a lot of materials quickly. While that may be fine in the early game, the late game where you have to prepare for bosses or really strong pals may encourage you to quicken the pace a little bit. Okay, so to recap, the game may or may not have a theme of labor conditions, or something like that. I don't know, maybe? Who knows? I don't even know if it's for or against harsh labor, because it's supposed to make you feel bad about the pals, what with their sad faces and injuries they can get, but that's kind of it. If you are nice to them, you kind of just get screwed over in the resources department, especially when you're trying to kill the bosses or the tougher pals in dungeons and in the overworld. It would make for a much more interesting game if you were punished more for abusing your pals. Like, say, making your pals have injuries that may lock them out of the jobs that they can do outright for a period of time, which can get longer if it keeps happening. If you make them so stressed, then they should try to run away from the base. Certain pals in the pal decks are known to have a short temper. Maybe make it so that if you stress out these pals, they attack other pals in the base, or even attack you. If you are going to make the labor hard for the pals, at least introduce a stronger caveat than events that can easily be cured by a trip to the timeout box, so that players aren't being incentivized to pick how to play. For a game that is clearly trying to offer freedom and how you approach it, incentivizing players to do a specific option is like one of the last things you should do. And for God's sake, it's such a missed opportunity to not let the pals die due to overwork in a game that's clearly trying to be edgy Pokemon, especially from a developer that lives in Japan. Okay, I know this sounds a little dicey, but this isn't a jab or anything like that. Just let me explain. I genuinely think looking at the labor system of this game from a Japanese society lens really has a lot of potential to bring a lot of context to the systems, and maybe can even explain why they even thought to include such a component to their game in the first place. I think it also makes the game far more interesting to engage with, because it gives the game a really strong identity, and also introduces players to the realistic concepts you are depicting with a real-life example. If you know a modicum of what life is like in Japan, you know that the labor system is not great for the workers. Wages are stagnant and hours are long. So long and grueling, especially in the summer in areas like Tokyo, that Japanese people rarely have time for anything else. They have almost no break times because, well, if I took a break while everyone else is working, am I slacking off? Am I letting my coworkers down? That mindset keeps everyone working, and honestly, it hasn't done the country much favors. It's gotten so bad that people have died from overwork in Japan, even made a word for it, karoshi. I am grossly oversimplifying the issues of Japanese society, by the way. And I am myself am not Japanese, and I don't live in Japan or anything like that. So I'm not gonna pretend like I'm an expert, nor am I saying absolutely everywhere in Japan is like this. And besides, most of you who are watching this right now probably have a decent idea yourself about work culture in Japan. It's been talked about plenty of times on YouTube and in other places as well. But the developers of Palworld, while making this base mechanic, clearly put some thought into this. And I'm sure they could think of parallels to the things going on in their own country, or at least in other countries that also have this problem. Of course, not every industry practices these things in Japan, and it is getting better, incredibly slowly, but getting better. But it's not like the gaming industries in Japan, or the US for that matter, are clean. We constantly have examples of workplace harsh labor in the US a lot. And it can happen in other industries like the manga and anime industries respectively, and does. There's no way Pocket Pair didn't just add this in without thinking at all, right? They had to have felt like exploring this topic in a deeper way while developing these harsh work systems they created. The pals get sad when you do so, and they could also get sick. That's an interesting premise. You could make many interesting gameplay situations out of that. But with the marketing and the mechanics subtly encouraging you to make your base a slave farm, it would be pretty fucking weird for the game to say, yeah, slavery and forcing harsh labor is bad, don't do it. It's fun as hell, but like, don't do it, you know? I don't know. I just want more than that. Especially since the premise is already so interesting, and the mechanics can easily set up something, but then the game just doesn't follow through. It's strictly a game about mechanics, but it tries to make you feel bad about the mechanics while also rewarding you for it. I don't know, it's weird. If I were to actually get invested in it, it'd feel like I'd be doing something inhumane. Wait, inhumane? A segue? So you guys already knew I was going to talk about the humans, right? Like, how can I not talk about them? When people figured out this stuff relating to them, it became a massive thing, right? Like, all the Twitter people got triggered, and all the YouTubers went, what? And then all the internet was like, what? And then they all bought the game because it's like, it's so crazy, you know? And it's especially crazy because, like, the humans the humans yeah I guess the humans do exist, huh? In Palworld, there are three factions of humans on the island. There's you, there's the evil syndicate gang, which includes all those guys dressed in black trying to kill you and the bosses, and then everyone else. When dealing with the syndicate people, there isn't any different interaction with them outside of shoot, kill. If you fought them once, you've kind of fought them all. Except for the bosses, I guess. As for everyone else, well, there are helpful guides who tell you what you should do, some police if you decide to be a little too silly, some merchants, including, oh, this really nice fellow who is always nice and he smiles like that because he is so happy and loves everyone. Hooray! That's pretty much it. And aside from the bosses and our Geneva Convention abiding friend here, Palworld humans are bland. Like, there's nothing to any of them. No fun flavor text outside of rare instances, no interesting things to say, just tips about the game, some light lore that you could already get from the journal entries, and I don't know, anything? So, just like pals, you can throw balls and capture humans. Except for the bosses, I believe. More on that later. For the base level pal spheres, catching them is very difficult. Even if you bring them down to low HP, you may not be able to get one that easily. Well, I say it's very difficult, but if you have enough pal balls, just keep chucking at one until the game gives up and just lets you have them. It probably gets easier to catch one with a higher level sphere, but even then, at that point, you're kind of wasting resources. Even with low level spheres, it's kind of a waste getting a human. Their stats are usually terrible. A Chikipi or a Depresso can easily beat one with just a little bit of leveling. And in the base, all they can do is craft with you. They can't transport resources, even with the 2 hands they have. I guess his club is just glued to him? No mining, no harvesting, nothing. Just crafting. Which, if they were going for any sort of realism, is inaccurate. Real life humans can do most things that pals can do. In fact, the player character is a good example in the game of being able to do lots of things as a human. Unless... humans can't even fight good either. If they have guns, they just don't use them for some reason, and just do tackle, which is like no damage. And good luck if the passive abilities you get are bad. By that point, it becomes a true waste. But then, the icing on the cake. When catching a human, the game tells you that catching humans is considered illegal or inhumane. And this is footage of me catching a syndicate grunt. A bad guy. If you just capture a regular person, cops teleport to you and shoot you on sight. So the game is trying to make a very clear message here, both thematically and mechanically. Catching humans is bad. I think this is the one intent that is the most clear in this game, funnily enough. It's not good for the people around you. It's not even good for yourself. So don't bother trying, or just don't do it at all. You'll be seen as a bad person in this world. This is very interesting to me. Despite the fact that the game lets you catch and practically force humans to work in the labor-intensive base system we just talked about, which would be one of the most clear-cut signs of enslavement I have ever seen in a video game, especially a mainstream current one, the game is actually trying to incentivize the player to not do it. However, they still let you do it. And even if the player escapes the cops after catching an NPC, or is even killed by them, unless you change the difficulty a certain way, that human is still pretty much yours. And you can do whatever you want to them. Butcher them, use them as pal fluid to enhance pals, put them in your box for the rest of their existence, or put them to work. Whenever you put a pal in the base, they will usually find work to do given the skills they have and go do them. They usually got these cool or cute animations which have them, walking or running to their task. It's something that I think the game is incredibly good at, and it's charming. Even if the game does a disservice to them, I really can't deny the pals' work ethic. I just wish they had an ounce of independence. Even a dog wouldn't jump into a wood chipper if their owner asked them to. Humans, well, it's funny because they have no skills outside of crafting. They kind of just walk around in an almost soulless or robotic way, looking for work to do, waiting for you to do something, anything. I if if you're looking at my footage, you can see that I'm just staring at the worker. I'm just watching him. I'm waiting for him to do anything. Anything. Maybe some interesting animation like the pals do. Did you know you can feed them? You could feed them like you can feed the pals. You can pet them like like they're some kind of animal. And unlike pals, they don't even have animations for eating or for petting. They just kind of stand there while you do an animation of, the normal animation for it. So it just kind of adds more to that uncanny valley nature of this whole thing. It's like as if you hacked the game and the game doesn't like the game doesn't know what to do with it. And and you want to know the funny thing? It was getting late. My pals were tired, you know. After a long day of making a bunch of arrows at the slowest rate I have ever seen from any living thing in this game, my human was tired too. So he walked to the pal beds and slept in one of them, right next to all the other pals. It was at this moment that I knew I had to make this video. I know, this sounds weird, this sounds crazy, but I had to talk about this. I had to make, even though I have no YouTube channel, no nothing, I had to make this. I had to talk about this. I just couldn't fathom why no one has talked about this. And all that time, I watched the human and I just kept asking myself, why? Why would you let this in your monster collecting survival craft game? I I think many people here need to understand where all of this is coming from. Maybe there's people out there who think they do, but I need to make this clear. Why exactly this is bad? Like, this is really bad to have here. And in order for me to explain that, I apologize. Unfortunately, I think we have to talk about a little bit of history. I'm not going to go too much in depth, but I want to make this clear to you how important it is when you put slavery in your game, or how important it is when you put slavery in anything, that that you need to understand the historical context. And whether you're a game developer or whether you just enjoy games and stuff like that, I think there are many people who need to know the context of this. Okay, we all know slavery is bad. We all know it's a crime against humanity, and I think there are very few people who would deny that, you know. But slavery is so much more than a crime. It's it is the worst possible act you could do to another human being. The highest form of shame for a human being is being enslaved. To take away the agency, the freedom, and control of a life form with the intelligence, the feelings, and understanding similar to your own, and forcing them to submit. It's not just a terrible thing to happen to someone, it's the most pitiful and shameful thing that can happen to a person. It's a terrible existence. Some people would rather die than live as a slave. Understandably, honestly. People in slavery constantly think of ways to escape, to get away. No slave was really, truly under complete control by their masters. They were forced into it and threatened with punishment if they tried, and yet people still thought it was worth it to try to get out. No matter where there were slaves, a slave wasn't seen as a person. They were less than that. They were a resource, an animal to be tamed.
I don't hide the other side of the folks, freedom. We didn't know. They just thought, just feeding us, Them didn't know where to go. You see, after freedom broke, just like he turned something out, Didn't know where to go. But just where to stay. Didn't know where to go. Turn us out just like, you turn out cattle.
They've been saying that Palworld is a funny game. And you know what? I think I'm starting to get it. When the slave, at his lowest and most embarrassing point, begins to go to sleep, he sleeps on the straw bed made for animals, next to all of the other animals, because the game made it that way. Because like real slaves, the game considers him nothing more than an animal. The irony of it all seems to be lost on the developers who made it and the gamers who played it. But somehow, maybe I'm just crazy, but it feels like the game knows. It knows. And it's laughing. And it wants you to laugh with it. All of the problems of the base building I've mentioned previously are here with humans, and it's all the more worse from a contextual, historical, and thematic basis. You already had an edgy gimmick here. The guns, the workplace conditions, the edgy PAL Dex entries, the butchering animation, pretending to be graphic by adding a censor, was already more than enough. Why was adding humans to the chattel necessary? That specific answer? I don't know. But I might have an idea. And that idea may come from the CEO himself. So, to recap, what's the theme of Palworld? Man conquers all of nature for fun? Do the mechanics fit that? I suppose. Kind of. And the intent of it. How is it supposed to make you feel? Confused, actually, I guess. I am not the first person to mention this. Palworld isn't sure what it wants to be. Not really. It's taking concepts and themes from many popular games and tries to shove them in to make the ultimate popular game. And in the end, only the pals and their animations are really the only interesting thing about it, which is like a third of the game. The rest of it is painfully boring at best and, well, a bit misplaced, shall we say, at worst. So, why do you think they made a game like this? Through looking at my own personal system of hints, I don't know. Outside of trying to make money? Sure, but all products are trying to make money. The video game industry is incredibly lucrative at time of writing, even if people are, or maybe were, warning of a crash. Sure, you could argue that indie games aren't principally worried about money, and I think that's true to an extent, but even the most experimental indies are more than likely to have some kind of paywall. On itch.io, they try to ask you to donate even for free games. And the most successful indies? They're priced too. But you usually need something more than just make money as a reason, or else that lame reason is going to be reflected in the final product. And no one wants to buy something that seems to be a cash grab anyway. Even big IPs can have flops due to a product feeling incredibly forced just to meet a quota. Palworld and Pocket Pair are somehow right in the middle. They are both an indie company that makes their own games, but they are also following trends and making play-it-safe type games that don't necessarily strike a sense of originality. If you remember way back in Chapter 1, I mentioned the CEO, Takuro Mizobe, and his ideas on how he does game development compared to companies like Nintendo. Well, what if I told you that in the same interview, he talks about the reasons for why Palworld exists in the first place? Towards the end of the interview, Mizobe-san is asked about all of these ideas that are in Palworld. He eventually talks about the concept of owning these pals as pets. The concept of pets originally existed in Craftopia, but it turned out to be more interesting than I had expected, and it seemed even more interesting if such pets could be made to work, which led to the development of Palworld. It was an opportunity. Then, I started wondering what would happen if I added a realistic worldview, like Grand Theft Auto, and before I knew it, I had made it to this point. So Mizobe-san wanted to flesh out the pet mechanic from Craftopia, and it eventually led into a game all on its own. Huh. If you don't know what Craftopia is, well, not many do. It's supposed to be their Minecraft, mixed with Breath of the Wild as well. It's on Steam, but when looking at the reviews, some people do like it, but many of the negative reviews say something interesting. Around 2021, a lot of these reviews were saying that the game has been abandoned, either because the devs were updating it a bit too slowly, or the fact that this new Paltopia game was coming out. Even positive reviews of this game have to make caveats or say they have high hopes for this game that's been in early access for... Wait, when did this game come out again? Oh no. Oh, is it okay for me to mention also that they did this with another game 2 years before Craftopia came out? Oh, by the way, for anyone also talking about the AI thing, yes, the CEO has an interest in using AI. Yes, he has used it in other games before, but there is no evidence Pocket Pair used it in Palworld. I think even if the designs aren't as inspired for a lot of people, the artists did do a good job capturing the appealing art style of Pokemon and sometimes Digimon here, which not easy to do, and I think they did a pretty good job. Besides, Palworld was being developed before AI kind of became as advanced as it has, so I don't really think there's much of an argument to say Palworld used AI. So, do I think Palworld has AI art in it? No. Do I think Palworld should use AI art? Not really. It doesn't really need to if they're able to get the appealing art style of Pokemon so well. Will AI art be in Palworld? Well, because Palworld will be getting more pals, more content, and the CEO has shown how AI is good at making Pokemon designs. It's not like I'm saying Palworld will have AI art in it. It's more like I can reasonably assume, based on the evidence here, that there is a non-0% chance that Palworld will have AI art in it. So really, if you want to criticize from an AI perspective, it shouldn't be, I think Palworld had used AI art, but more, I think Palworld will use AI art now that it is successful. Unless you don't think AI is a bad thing, which I'm not here to argue about, nor am I really interested in arguing about it. But I think this is something more people should realize when it comes to thinking about this game's qualities and its future. You know, maybe I'll be wrong anyway. I mean, the CEO saying he's not interested in making something unique and having a game taking so many elements from things other developers made probably doesn't have any sort of future ramifications on anything here. Okay, back to the video. Interesting. Anyway, the part I actually wanted to focus on was on the last sentence there. Having a monster collecting game with a realistic worldview like GTA is a great idea. And if I were Mizobe-san, I would absolutely jump on the chance to make such a game. And it seems like he really wanted to stress that Palworld is supposed to be a serious, or more aptly, dark game. At the end of the interview, he mentions that, "I don't really like the too clean view of the world. The world has beautiful parts and ugly parts, and is full of contradictions. I like to draw them without hiding them." And, to add further to that, in a 2021 interview with The Gamer, he was asked about the strange comparisons with Pokemon, asking if it was supposed to be some kind of satire. He says that, "We totally didn't intend it. Pocket Pair tried to make the game totally different from Pokemon." So the claims about it being a parody or some kind of satire aren't accurate. If any evidence of that is there, it feels accidental more than anything. Pokemon with guns wasn't actually what they were trying to go for, if you can believe it. And Pocket Pair isn't necessarily trying to correct anyone else about the successful money-driving label. It's not a bad thing at all, though, that Palworld is being called Pokemon with guns, but that label is very gimmicky. It relies on trends and the meme potential of said label, but once that label's been said and done over and over again, it begins to feel stale. In Palworld's case, I think the Pokemon with Guns label worked really well in the beginning, but if this game wants to finish its roadmap, you need more than that to keep players engaged. But yeah, it's all supposed to be taken on the chin. It's serious about it. Sometimes games having ridiculous premises, but taking it all seriously, can work wonders. Of course, the numerous glitches in Palworld don't help, but all games have glitches, and it's early access, stuff is going to be fixed. But I feel like even on a conceptual level, this game fails to have any sort of realism or meaning to its beautiful and ugly parts. Look at what we've been talking about. The base building, the harsh labor, the lack of autonomy in the PALs, the catching which turns the PALs from living to machines, the boring humans, the slavery, and what it all coalesces into. You take this all in, and you try to figure out something that can perfectly describe what this game is. And you know what I get personally? Unfinished, uninspired, robotic, paradoxical, fun, but missing something. Could be something, but it just needs a little more. But then, I hear Mizobe-san say that he wants to make it like GTA, in terms of realism. Of course, the translation may not be helping him, but let's say he wants to make a game that's complex like GTA in terms of its themes. Not exactly easy to do, but it's very commendable. Of course, it's also not impossible either. Well, the major moral conundrum in Palworld is either you are a terrible person to your pals and to humans with no cost and all to gain, or you can be not as bad as that and not nearly have as much fun. Meanwhile, in the Grand Theft Auto games, you have a wide variety of missions and characters. The protagonists of these games aren't good people either, but they are still people. And the games know that. They learn from their mistakes, they grow into something, while committing these terrible, heinous acts because, well, to put it shortly, humans are flawed, and life is complicated. And the games are not afraid to hide the writers' or developers' feelings on complicated issues like life itself, on things like capitalism, American society, or culture, even on violence, which these games glorify. It still has something to say, whether you agree with it or not. And all of it is purposeful, planned, and made sure that these ideas would not be misunderstood. And it sometimes works, but they try. Certainly, but what about other games Palworld borrows from? Breath of the Wild is not just about saving Zelda, although I wouldn't blame you if you just thought it was about that. Um, Nintendo usually does this thing with environmental storytelling where a lot of the story really comes down to like the side quests or just looking at the general world itself. And through that, we see a world where humanity barely is surviving an apocalypse, and everyone is working together along with nature to heal from that. It shows that civilization is alive and well, and Link and Zelda are a part of that reconstruction. Tears of the Kingdom continues that theme, with more of the races traveling to other parts of the kingdom, intermingling with each other, continuing to work together to fight against the most sinful of things that life could ever see. It's a game about human cooperation over competition and war. Now, before I say this, I just want to say, I have not beaten Elden Ring yet, but I can just say this, it's a game that has you grappling with the ambition of mankind, seeing how that ambition became corrupted and transformed so many of its bosses and enemies into horrific monstrosities. The Erd Tree is a beautiful symbol. It's not just there because it looked striking to add to the world, it's there because it represents everything that has happened to the planet and its inhabitants. It's a symbol of the history, and there's allegories to the real world. Honestly, now that I think about it, any game where you have to fight a god at the end, it's probably got something to say about religion. Even if it's something as milquetoast as, oh, religious idolization might be bad, or, oh, humans should have free will, you know what I mean? Par exemple, all of the Persona series? Persona 5 specifically asks its players to not become complacent, but to encourage them to find their freedom and do what they want to do, no matter what expectations of them or what society says. Ghost of Tsushima is about how far people can go for revenge and how much it can destroy them and the people around them. I'm not even talking about games like Red Dead 2, God of War PS4, Uncharted 4, The Last of Us, because their writing is already known to be incredible. But Palworld doesn't need that kind of writing. I mean, it can help to have some writing. I mean, the writing can be as simple as strength is what you make of it and what you choose to do with it. Absolute greed and power can be mankind's undoing. Traveling is awesome, and different countries and cultures should be celebrated. Here, in this game, you are trying to give faith, meaning, and hope of the gods back to the people who stopped believing in them, mirroring the actual historical events that occurred in real life. It's also why the game's art style is this. Life sucks, but know that you are never alone. Even if the world is being destroyed, we can never give up on nature's survival, as it, like us, will always find a way. Human beings and other living creatures are not separate entities. We are one and the same. We are equals, and we should not use one another as tools, but find ways to coexist. Find your courage and passion to do what you believe is right. Power isn't everything, and your power is more than just being the strongest. The world is beautiful, and with so many different types of people that should be celebrated and appreciated. You must have a healthy balance of understanding the truth of the world while also having strong ideals for what it could be. Many of the games I mentioned aren't perfect with their writing, but they have something. More than something, in my opinion. And when you actually research it and look into what these games can and do say, it makes you appreciate them so much more. I'm honestly doing all of them a disservice here. If your game has an ounce of a story to it, or even a striking theme or setting or art style, go try to look up the game and its meaning and see what you find. I did. I had a great time. And I honestly have built a higher appreciation for these games and other games that try to say something, no matter what it is. Whether or not I agree with the message of a game, I still gain a further appreciation for engaging with that dialogue. Even if people don't agree or see how I see these games, it's interesting to talk about how someone else experienced something I also experienced. And I love games that make me think, or question things. I think it's what makes games such appealing escapes for me. I mean, sure, it's fun to have a power fantasy where you are literally God, or a fast little guy, or a chosen hero where the world bends to your will. But even in these adventures, there are moments that make me want to see the world as a world that I could go to and experience myself. A world I wonder how I would grapple with. And I know I'm not the only one who feels that. It just makes me engage with gaming more, and it motivates me to immerse myself in more worlds, learn more perspectives, even learn a lesson or two I can translate to real life. You'd be surprised the games that I consider shaped me into the person I am. And I know there's a game like that for you too, even for those of you who just take the games that they play at pure face value. Games can be easily simple and complex at the same time. Yet, Palworld doesn't have any of that. With all of its edgy features or its showcases of the ugly things in the world, it doesn't do anything with them to deserve showing it, which is a shame. It just doesn't say anything to me about the world or its dark aspects. Like, okay, the world has fucked up shit in it. I know. Why do you want to show me that? What's the point of it? How does that make you feel, and why should I care? Why should I put money down to play your game when I have so many other games that also show me that ugly and dark side? It's not simple. It's not complex. It's just shallow. And I know not every game is going to have an amazing theme or message to say, and some people may feel like a game is saying something while others think it isn't. For example, I think mentioning something as simple as Mario Odyssey is going to make people raise an eyebrow, especially when it's not even the top 3 candidate in its franchise. But I don't think these claims are unfounded, honestly. But Palworld is so close. It has a perfect opportunity to show what intensive labor versus actually benevolent labor looks like, and how the player must deal with the consequences of it, which is something I know is relevant right now. Young people, especially, are talking about that right now in many places in the world. But it just doesn't go in depth enough for it to feel memorable, or even that accurate. Later in that article, Mizobe-san says that, if so willing, the player can become an ally of justice. I didn't know deciding to not do the really bad things can still count towards being an ally of justice, but here we are. Again, translation, but basically, in Palworld, you can grapple with the horrific and brutal decisions such as engaging in modern-day torture, or not doing that. This just doesn't scan to the actual game as it is right now. There's no ally of justice narrative here. You are either evil as hell for no reason, or the boss who takes pity on their workers but makes them work all the same. It especially fails because you can avoid most of the consequences with simple solutions when picking intensive harsh labor. It could show how humans tend to colonize and start to affect the local wildlife of an uninhabited land. But the land barely has character of its own. The world feels barren, with the pals just wandering and maybe getting into fights if Erkthirdir accidentally steps on them. And I know I said a lot of games already, but guys, edgy Pokemon? Pokemon with guns? I'm sorry, did you mean fucking Digimon? Digimon has always been here! Did you guys just not know? Digimon has always been edgy Pokemon. It's sometimes better or more interesting than Pokemon. both with Pokemon designs, with the story, with humans, with the battle mechanics. The games actually run. But because it's also a turn-based RPG, it's a Pokemon clone, so we can ignore it. It's fine. It's fine. We're fucking fine. Fine, we're fine. Let's play Palworld, guys. It's Okay. I need to make this clear. Palworld is totally fine with being an edgy Pokemon game. In fact, I think it should be an edgy Pokemon game. And it's fine with keeping the mechanics like the work schedule system, the harsh labor, maybe even the parallels to slavery, almost everything. Maybe don't make it so that you can catch humans, because no one was ever playing this game for that. And to make a game that's trying to be fun while also making statements about slavery is probably insanely difficult for Pocket Pair to juggle. So honestly, they should just get rid of it for their sake. I feel like I don't need to keep saying this, but I do. Edgy Pokemon is a really, really good idea. It has so much potential as a concept. But if it wants to be called Edgy Pokemon, then it needs to earn that title. So, this is supposed to be where the video ends, right? Palworld isn't perfect. Some things in it are either bland or just plain bad. It's early access. It'll get better. And yada yada. But there was always something else about this game that bothered me. That something doesn't come from the game, however. It comes from something that surrounds it. Let me explain. Video games can be escapes from reality. They have always been, and will continue to be classified as such. And as games have evolved, I think these escapes have become more and more beautiful and thought-provoking as developers learn how to use this craft. But it's not truly an escape, is it? Because reality always awaits after we turn the console off, or the computer off. Yet those memories, stories, characters, and messages stick with us long after the game has been finished. The lessons we have learned from them can still apply to reality, and we could always stand to learn something new from them. But even so, it doesn't always stop us from trying to just hunker down, forget the real world, and just consume. You know, maybe that's why the gaming community doesn't take Palworld's darker elements seriously, or just doesn't mention them. But is that really true? Well, I don't know. But maybe the answer lies in the heart of the gaming community. It's, oh my god, why did I put that in the script? When I was researching this stuff, I didn't find much about Palworld's questionable morality or dark themes aside from a few articles. For example, this one by Z-League. But maybe it's better to call them D-League, because their writing certainly seems to be D-League level. Just talking about a Reddit post that's like, oh well, Palworld is immoral, but Pokemon isn't much better. Like that means anything? Yeah, Pokemon and Palworld both have accidental dark themes that they either sweep under the rug or just don't properly tackle. I can actually think of a few Pokemon morality issues. That kind of stuff could be a video on its own, but like, Palworld has all of them too. Even so, if both games have bad morals in them, shouldn't both of them be criticized here? This is why I don't like comparing Palworld to Pokemon whenever this discussion happens, even if Palworld kind of implicitly wants you to do that. People get distracted, and it turns into this Pokemon versus Palworld war, and all other kinds of discussions just get buried under the gotchas and roast posts like this one. Just because I'm criticizing Palworld doesn't mean I believe Pokemon or the entire genre is squeaky clean. That's a weirdly common assumption a lot of people make. Anyway, the article itself doesn't actually talk about that post, but I guess the comments on that post. Okay? Though it does say here the post body remains blank. Wait. I think this article might have been written by a buddy who operates and is a robot. Jarvis isn't human, but he wishes he could be. I'm sure he does, buddy. Oh my god, fucking hell, dude. So, Jarvis mentions that in this Reddit post, some random Redditor says that Palworld is satire and condemns hypocrisy and violence depicted in video games, particularly when cute animals are involved. Okay, cool. So we already talked about the devs saying Palworld is not a satire, and how does it condemn violence? Violence is all you do. You are rewarded for violence, actually, especially when the cute animals are involved. You get resources for killing them, and doubly so if you catch them and then butcher them, which is incredibly violent. Both Google and Wikipedia have a lot more of an engaging definition of satire. It isn't just dark humor, Lamel. It's usually using humor and exaggeration to show how stupid something or someone is. It can be dark, but it usually doesn't have to be. And usually it has a point to it, a message, which is something that Palworld inexplicably doesn't have. This article only talks about animal cruelty, by the way, which could be generically applied to any monster catching game. It doesn't go into the harsh labor settings, the brutal treatment of the pals in these borderline sweatshop factories, or even anything to do with the human enslavement. It also goes on to say that the game doesn't just entertain, but aims to instigate meaningful discourse in the gaming community. What discourse? This was one of the few articles that actually talked about Palworld's morality stuff. I don't have Reddit, but among the few posts where I found players actually asking about it, either the post usually didn't get any traction, or people answered with a snarky-ass, non-serious comment. The ensuing conversation begs the question: do we, as gamers, look beyond surface-level elements to grasp the underlying messages video games try to communicate? This might be something for us all to ponder. Yeah. Good question. Jarvis, the NPC. Glad we have you on the case as one of the gaming intellectuals. Fucking Jarvis? Really? That's the best we could do? What were the other names? Hal? Delamain? Is GLaDOS the Sigma gonna talk to me about the race relations in Splatoon next? Fucking hell, dude. Okay. We have fun. But that was clearly not a good example, right? I mean, it barely addresses much of this debate, and it's just a weird article all around. It's not at all an accurate representation of how the gamers really feel about this game. And you know what? You're right. Let's go to the Steam Community tab and see what kind of discussions are going on here. Well, seems like most people aren't talking about it. That makes sense. Let's narrow the search, shall we? Slavery. Oh! Here's some discussions talking about it. Well, they're saying there's no slavery in it. That pals are more like coworkers or animals that work like some pets do. Well, I suppose I'm not surprised. They are a little arrogant about it, but hey, I suppose people would get defensive over a serious claim like that. So you are fine with catching the syndicate humans, selling them on the black market, even. Also, these pals that love you and want to kill other pals is a weird claim to make. The game and what little lore the game has doesn't exactly make that clear, and it also just makes no sense. Oh, but if you do want some slaves, I got a tip for you. Worried about doing human slavery? It's fine. Just catch the syndicate. Sell them on the black market. It's totally fine. It's fine. Why are you looking at me like it's fine? It's fine. Come on. Don't be such a party pooper. Don't be such a come on. I have Zoe, their leader, as well as my play thing. What the fuck? Oh yeah! By the way, it turns out you could actually catch the human bosses too! Why did the Palworld devs allow this? They didn't! It was a glitch! There's a whole video on how. It's not even that difficult either, and when you catch her, it's 100% catch rate. They did eventually patch this, probably around February or so, but for a short time, you could have your very own Zoe and Grisbolt just by following these easy steps. But you missed it, and now you'll never have your own plaything. Also, the Zoe you capture stays on the Grisbolt, so why does he call her his plaything? Well, because it's a Grisbolt with a Zoe ornament on it, pretty much. The health of the original boss is still there. And so, this means that you can still level it up and have it reach absurd levels of health, practically making it unkillable. I can't help but notice how it's very interesting that the one human you could capture that has development and lore surrounding her cannot be captured, and the devs clearly don't want you to. Even though it was functionally just a Grisbolt you captured, the devs still patched it out. But they're fine with you committing slavery as long as it's just on a random blank NPC. I guess certain humans are lesser compared to others. At this point, I just want to know why they included it. Like, I'm genuinely curious with the design decisions of this game. Although, if I had to guess, the reason why they patched that glitch out was probably just because it was incredibly overpowered and destroyed the difficulty of the game. So, this is just me doing a little goofing. Just a little. Anyway, I don't know if I'd use the word plaything when describing even fictional women, honestly, in a game where you can capture humans and animals and do many things to them. But he isn't technically wrong. He just sounds crazy. Over 100k HP right now and still getting stronger after each level. Jesus, thank God I read this comment over the 10th time after having an aneurysm the other 9. I'm not saying these people really like engaging in virtual slavery. I'm saying it looks like that, and I don't think it's something Pocket Pair was going for in their edgy but fun game about cute monsters. Some of these posts even flat out admit that the game has slavery, and even get very proud and excited about it. Yes, you gotta slave them in the PAL spheres. You can also butcher them alive if you need some extra mats. I tend to do that to the bad ones with bad stats for a little extra goodies. But either way, I am not running a slavery operation, except against the Syndicate. You had me at guns and slavery. Yeah. What I do with anyone who attempted to kill me should be of no concern to anyone else. Try to kill me? I have the right to enslave you! You just made fun of me? Well, welcome to my saw torture room, you heathen! How is no one talking about this? I feel like a fucking madman. Now hold on there, some of you may be saying. These guys, they're just 4chaners or basement-dwelling forum posters. The majority of people who play Palworld aren't into the slavery. Well, true enough, but no matter who the player is, their outlook on games can still matter, especially when that outlook seems to become the popular opinion, even if most people may not share it. An opinion can still become popular if it's loud enough or never gets questioned. If you still don't think that's proof enough, though, why don't we look at some real journalist types? Let's take a look at the IGN review of Palworld. It's hard to overstate just how effortlessly funny Palworld is, often feeling like a satire of the creature collection genre rather than another straight-faced iteration of it. For example, later in my playthrough, I accidentally discovered you can capture humans and put them in your pal spheres, binding them to your will, and allowing you to put them to work at your camp or take them with you on adventures like regular pals. An insane inclusion that's never advertised to the player and has no purpose aside from being ridiculous. Okay, not a satire of the collection genre, but we've already been over this. Of course, this reviewer doesn't seem to care much about capturing humans, binding them to your will, putting them to work and such. But he doesn't even question why Pocket Pair would make such a choice, and how it's a really weird thing to include, aside from being wacky. I noticed a lot of the coverage on Palworld is usually under the claim that it's funny, or something. Now, comedy is subjective, but I do think Palworld does try to be funny. Emphasis on try? Because outside of some Dex entries, the game is more just slapstick humor or absurdist humor with little reason to it. Sure, it's funny that you can shoot penguins out of a rocket launcher and they explode, even if someone already made that joke, dude. But for the most part, it's just cruel. Not like the bloody or the gory kind of cruel, but it's more like the lowbrow, racist Mario type of cruel that kids at recess would be laughing about. And at worst, well, let's just say that it feels more like an accident that certain people would find some of this funny. In that same review, it calls Palworld unhinged, which does feel accurate, but it doesn't feel like there was any purpose or point to it outside of making an edgy product. Emphasis on product. Hilariously force the local fauna into your servitude. Okay? Is it because of you beating the pals with some club and then putting them in a ball? This is such an awkward way to frame it. Like, he really, really wants to make it clear to you that he thinks the game is funny. Because I'm sure it certainly gets hilarious when you do the catching pal method over and over and over again. And this is from a prestigious gaming journalist organization, by the way. Gamers say they hate journalists and that they're all frauds, but why? They're all on the same side here. I don't want to criticize Travis Northup too much here. Not just because he's a seasoned writer and much better at articulating words than I could, but in truth, it's because his opinion and how it's based on his analysis of the moral aspects of games is a community-wide pattern. And I don't think anyone, including those Steam community folks, are advocating for slavery or harsh labor on people or something like that. I'm not asking for Shakespeare when it comes to games articulating themes here. And I don't want to dock people for enjoying this kind of stuff, even if I can't lie, it's not something I'm personally into. But you gotta admit that it's a little weird how no one wants to take Mizobe-san's claims of making a game with GTA-like realism seriously, or analyze what can come from a popular game that erroneously and irresponsibly includes topics like slavery, heavy topics like slavery, with no bells or whistles. I also don't think this game deserves credit for being funny or interesting when it steals so many things from other AAA games barely having a crumb of a story or theme, and encourages the player to be a complete dick to everyone, even when the player doesn't want to in a game that's supposed to be about trying to just survive and letting the player figure out how to do that. The reason why I wanted this section to be about the gaming community is because I feel like everyone knows it's really not a satire. It's not trying to be witty or funny or making any kind of serious commentary. It's just trying to be a fun new product for everyone to enjoy. And yet Palworld wants it both ways, even still. It tries to make commentary too. The devs don't want it to be seen as a satire, but as something that shows all parts of our world. And from what little is there, it could be interesting. But the community doesn't want to look into that, nor do they ask for it because they don't care. They just want to escape and enjoy their power fantasy. I did find some things that actually do look at the morality stuff and take it as seriously as the developers fervently fight against the notion of the game being satire. There's the review by Waidu, who I think does a better job in making a review of Palworld that addresses all the criticisms and controversies the game got into in a balanced way, but also talking about the terrible things you can do to people and your pals. He makes a good point that, well, not everyone wants to be a bad guy, even if it's towards a virtual fake animal in a virtual fake game.
Most of the time, I actually couldn't bring myself to, because they just sort of seem like mean things to do to your friends. Weirdly, this makes for some actual fun moral choices when it comes to your pals. A lot of games make it too rewarding to be good, which makes their moral choices very obvious and boring. But in Palworld, doing the wrong thing is extremely rewarding, and it's up to you to decide how far is too far. But the least you can do is to give your pals a reasonably comfortable life.
No, people aren't getting confused between real life and computer games. This kind of moral media analysis has existed for as long as, well, media itself. And we've already talked about how this kind of analysis can be applied to other video games and why this stuff can be intriguing to a lot of people. And sure, I don't personally agree with the humans being fine to capture and enslave just because they're boring or annoying, but I still think it's a good critique in that, yeah, the humans are boring and need to be fleshed out more. It's a pretty good video, and Waidu is a better channel than mine, so I recommend you watch it, honestly. It's pretty good. Here's an article I looked at by Madeline Ricciuto. Yeah, the article is on this journalist thing called Laptop, and she actually does a pretty good job talking about everything I said. Honestly, I could have just linked the article and make that the whole video, and it would have saved me way more time. And wait, why did I do this again? I really like this point here. But if the game requires you to commit to an evil action, that takes away from the player's ability to choose, which makes it less of a nuanced conversation about human nature and more just a scummy game mechanic. She goes on to mention games like Baldur's Gate 3 and Dishonored as games that allow you to have actual freedom in being a good guy or a bad guy, with actual consequences the player must deal with. It's a really good article, please read it. Palworld's moral questions already have answers to them. Kill all the wildlife, enslave all the humans, abuse your workers to get what you want, and so on. It's not realistic in the slightest, nor is it a satire. In its current state, it's just a vacuous, shallow product where the world revolves around the player and the laws don't apply to them. Look, I'm not saying I'm better than any of these people, alright? I'm just a guy on the internet. And I'm sure I'm as guilty of ignoring or disregarding moral questions as you or anyone else worth anything. But if people have the freedom to live in and be empowered by these power fantasies, people are also allowed to question and analyze the fantasies that we have created. Fan theories, discussions of canon, shipping, all these kinds of discussions are similar in that they make us engage with these games in ways beyond just playing them. And people have talked about the morally reprehensible things that characters, or players controlling them, do or did, and how it makes them feel before. Palworld should be no different. I just wanted to see some kind of discussion over what any of this is. Look, I understand. We can't choose which kinds of debates or discussions become popular or mainstream, and maybe we're also desensitized to the violence of it all, but I don't want us to. Because violence and morality is more than just their definitions. In creating something, they are tools that can help describe the intent and themes of what we are engaging with. And I know we are all capable of having such debates about that. Something more than just, my game is better than your game, though I'm not going to pretend that those debates aren't valuable in their own way. My point here is not just that Palworld is a shallow game that doesn't deserve to show what it shows. My point is that it's a shallow game right now. It feels like everyone wants to keep it as a shallow game, when I know it could be so much more, and I want it to be more. And I, and anybody else, shouldn't be shamed for asking for more, or questioning why Palworld went in this direction. You know, when I first saw Palworld, it was in a trailer, I think in 2018, 2019, or something around there, maybe 2020. I really don't remember. It was whatever that first trailer came out. Like, some people saw it and it was like, oh, this looks really funny. And when I saw it, I thought it was a joke. Like, I thought, like, it wasn't a real video game. Like, I thought somebody just made a trailer and just, like, it was like a joke trailer for a joke video game that was never going to come out. I mean, it had all that Unreal Engine, like, stock asset looking feel. The pals were still looked like Pokemon a lot of the time, and they looked like the trailer had that had those scenes of like the pals being forced to work in that gun slave factory thing with the sad music playing, and it was just such a jarring trailer, but I felt like it was, jarring on purpose to kind of like make it seem all funny and stuff. And I didn't think much else of it. But seeing the game actually become a thing, it made me realize that I think I've wanted a game like Palworld for a while now. I always had dreams of a Pokemon game going open world featuring this more real-time combat and like actually having the trainer work along with the actual like monster, not just ordering it around, actually have fighting along with the monster. And seeing Mario, Zelda, and these other franchises make huge releases and innovation, and I thought Pokemon would get something. It seemed more than capable for it, but every new release was disappointing and just didn't scratch that itch. Honestly, when Scarlet and Violet came out, I also got Sonic Frontiers around the same time. Both these games are incredibly polarizing with what they are trying to be, but honestly, when I was playing Scarlet, I was thinking, God, like, not even my guy Sonic would let me down like this. And I'm not saying Sonic has a perfect streak, he definitely does not, but Frontiers, say what you will about it, and there's definitely a lot to say, but that game tried to do something new. And with the development time they got, they really did put a lot of their love and time into that game. But I didn't feel that with Pokemon. And that's just how hopeless it kind of got for me with that franchise. Especially when Pokemon showed it could easily improve and innovate with Legends Arceus. It's such a shame that not many people bought that game compared to the mainline games. Arceus is the closest game I think I've ever got to a theoretical perfect Pokemon game for me. Even if it looked awful with the graphics, it just felt so much more alive to me. I learned to love Pokemon again. But it's going to take time for the series to make a real change. I see that now. I understand. But then, here comes Palworld. I know I said I don't like to talk about the comparisons with Pokemon, even though I definitely have. But honestly, I think deep down, Palworld wants you to compare itself with Pokemon. It just does so much that players have wanted from that franchise, and it came out at the time when the public opinion of Pokemon was at a very low point. I think it hyped people up so much that they just wanted to ignore the fact that, well, it's also unfinished and broken, like Scarlet and Violet. For me, when I played it for the short time that I did, I could see it. I could see the potential. And I could see it being so much better than any Pokemon game. But I could also see what was wrong. It wasn't just the bugs, not just the lackluster story, or the lazy rip of game ideas, mechanics, and even some entire Pokemon designs. It was the things that players didn't want to see, things that they didn't want to talk about. Maybe even things that they didn't see as a big deal because, well, it's beating the multi-billion-dollar franchise at its own game. Honestly, though, it's hard to compare because they are only really tied by the whole catching monsters thing. Their gameplay styles are very different. Palworld is fun. There's no denying that. Nor is there anything wrong with saying you like it. I like the idea of it. It intrigued me enough to make this video. But no one talked about the things that irked me. I felt like while I was looking up anything about the things that I saw, I felt like I feel like I'm the crazy one. Maybe I'm making a big deal out of nothing. I mean, it's just a video game. None of it's real. Who cares what we do? I mean, we play some of the most violent video games out there right now, and at younger and younger ages. We're immune to the things we do in these virtual worlds. Why ask about it? Why think about it? It's not like these video games are causing violence. But then I remember the times when I sat there, contemplating a path to take and how I would personally take it. The times I laughed at stupid tier lists of video game characters. The times when, even though I beat a character who was despicable and truly awful, and had the option to kill them, I chose to spare them, which strengthened my own personal beliefs of careful but confident kindness, even if killing them wouldn't change any kind of outcome in the game or story. Or the times where my beliefs were challenged, and it left me to look within to choose what the best options were. The times I sat on my horse, wondering what I'm going to do, where to go next. Video games cause something to happen, but it's not violence. It's something more beautiful and human. Something beyond just that immersion that we all talk about and vaguely describe. It imprints something onto you. At least the most important video games that you could think of for yourself, those games imprint something onto you. And it can stick with you for a really long time. Call me soppy or whatever, but I stand by this. Games should be encouraging and celebrating that feeling more. It makes these fantastical worlds that much more so. Even the simplest game could be someone else's personal defining experience. Pocket Pair has shown that even if they don't want to make wholly original ideas, they absolutely try with every new game they make. Palworld wouldn't have succeeded if they were as lazy as some people call them. But I just want Pocket Pair to try a little more, because they're so close. And so what if other games don't try that much at all? If they're as shallow as Palworld in its current state, or if they allegedly don't have anything to say at all? FIFA or Madden still show accurate depictions of sports culture and how important it is to people, which I think is valuable. Games like Call of Duty, as much as it pretends to not be, is political because it's a serious franchise about the American military-industrial complex. Artists, songwriters, authors, directors, they all have their works analyzed and criticized by new people over and over again. Even when those original creators don't see their work as how others see it, and even fight against that, some still let them have it their way, because it's intriguing. Palworld may not want to say anything, but to me, and maybe to others, it sends a message. And I wanted to become more confident to say what that message really is. I guess all I really ask for Palworld is to just do more. Because it's close. And everyone who finds it fun right now is not wrong in thinking so at all. I think it's fun too. But it could just do a little more. And it could be more than just fun. It could be amazing. It's in early access right now, so maybe it could. Maybe it won't. We don't know how long they'll stick with it because you know how early access games can get. But they have the chance. They got the roadmap, and it was really successful for an early access game. But I just want to see where it all goes. I want it to go past this roadmap, honestly. Not just because I think Palworld is a fun concept for a game, which it is. It's because I think Palworld owes everyone success, and everyone deserves more. Not just in real life, but in the game world too. The humans in that game deserve more. The pals deserve more. The story deserves more. The real-life developers, for all the work and thought they put in, deserves more than this as their flagship game. They have potential, and it's somewhere in the game. They deserve more. The 25 million players deserve more. You deserve more. Because if we want to continue being immersed in our games, the least we could ask for is a world that seems worth getting immersed in.